The complex nature of mental health concerns, and mental illnesses leads to many workplaces struggling to adapt themselves to addressing the problem. Sometimes, workplaces will simply refuse to address concerns entirely. This video will review the benefits associated with talking about mental health and provide practical tips for building both awareness and responding skills in the workplace. Talking about mental health concerns is the first step. However, only 36% of employees would discuss a mental health concern with a manager. This is the product of social stigma, which means that supervisors and other staff aren't aware of the signs of mental illnesses and often feel unprepared to start these important conversations. In addition, the person experiencing a difficulty isn't prepared or feels safe to discuss their concerns with a supervisor. As a result, mental health concerns often go unrecognized and unaddressed until much later. This means that things don't get better, and what might have originally been easily addressed through a minor change in routine or the work environment may now be a severe mental injury or illness. Employee well-being is a responsibility of leadership. Part of the reason staff don't disclose a concern is because of leadership practices which don't encourage it. In this video, Justice Ted Kelly talks about his experience from over 25 years in the legal profession and the challenges justice sector professionals have historically faced with addressing mental health due to their workplace culture.
My name is Ted Kelly, and I'm a judge. I've been presiding as a judge since late 2013. But before that, for about 23 years, I was a criminal defense lawyer practicing in Toronto. I represented many people who were facing prosecution who had mental health disabilities. But I also, worked with a lot of lawyers and judges and other justice sector professionals, and I observed their stresses and experienced my own. A particular problem, I guess, is the stress that justice sector professionals face when they're dealing with difficult cases that involve consideration of criminal conduct with really sometimes terrible, even horrific consequences for victims. And I've found that over the years that many of the justice professionals that I've worked with have been impacted by their exposure to these cases. I started at a time when criminal law was considered to be a very tough profession. It was one in which people were expected to accept criticism without any complaint and not to voice concerns about their own issues, anxieties, and I guess the challenges that they faced. There's been a substantial change over 25 years, and I attribute that to some extent just to changing culture, but also the movement away from a culture dominated by males and one that's become more gender equal. And I think in a general sense there's been a move towards a greater tolerance towards considering the issues that members of the profession have, although I still think we're a long way away from being very open about discussing our own problems. My early experience was essentially learning to be an advocate in open court in the cases that I was involved in. And in those early years of practice, I made strategic mistakes and errors in judgment, and those mistakes were critiqued by judges and opposing counsel sometimes very strenuously. And I had to learn to accept that. That was both good and bad. The good side of it was that it encouraged me to become a more rigorous advocate, to be more prepared. I think the bad side of it was that it caused me to be reticent about expressing my own concerns, the weaknesses I may have felt, or the anxieties I had, or the lack of confidence I had. It was considered to be a weakness to discuss the problems that I had with other people. And I think my experience was relatively common at the time. I think that other lawyers felt the same way. We were reticent to talk about our problems, and we equated consideration of our own problems or discussing them as a sign of weakness, and not something that we should be doing. We didn't want to let our guard down. We wanted to present as being very confident and in control. With the consequence that we didn't talk about our problems, I think. There was no open dialogue about the challenges we faced. And particularly, as I mentioned earlier, I guess the impact that the cases that we dealt with and the sadness and suffering that we saw through those cases had upon us, on our professional and our personal lives. Well, I think by having the conversations with each other, we're more likely to have a healthy perspective on the problems that we face and the stresses that we face. And thinking about this, I have in the past considered it in some respects to be a selfish act to burden other people with my problems. But looking at it more carefully, and actually in considering it for this discussion, I've come to think about it as being not a selfish act, but maybe an unselfish act. To talk to other people about the problems that I have is something that may assist them as well as me. If we have a better understanding of the context in which our anxieties or our lack of confidence occurs, and if we can share that with other people, I think we will have a healthier perspective, and we're likely to be able to identify our problems more easily, and then maybe address them as well.
Maintaining a workplace culture built on trust, honesty, and fairness creates an environment which is conducive towards not only good mental health, but also enables staff to bring their concerns to management. One of the ways in which you can ensure a good workplace culture is through compliance with Ontario's Accessible Employment Standard. Having a written and accessible accommodation policy takes the guesswork out of ensuring employees receive the accommodations they need. As leaders in your workplace, you can make it safer and healthier through good policy. Letting your staff know what the policy is means that they will be more willing to talk about their concerns and reach out for help when it is needed.